Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Now today, you've caught me in a bit of a myth-busting kind of mood. Because whenever I browse online stories and news stories, I'm immediately reminded of why I record this daily tech podcast, because it almost feels like there is this ready-made narrative sometimes that everybody just blindly follows. But I want to start creating a new narrative. And I know you do. That's why you listen to this show, right? For example, we've all seen those news stories with a headline saying AI or robots are coming to take your job. And people read these stories and think, you know what, I'm doomed. And it's too late for me to change now. But the reality, of course, is there are thousands and thousands of job vacancies sitting unfilled with incredible salaries on offer too. And the problem, of course, is the tech skills gap. So you know where I'm going to head with this, right? Let's do the math. Old roles are disappearing as they're not going to be needed. New roles are sitting empty, pay great money, but they need new skills. So surely, maybe we all just need to think about reskilling. Stop being pedantic, Neil. It's not that easy. That's what many of you might have just shouted at your device. But let's look at the facts. I recently saw in Phoenix that Steve Wozniak created a program that will reskill people and give them a job at the end of it. So then when I returned to the UK, I set out to see if there was anything similar over here. Now, a Google search later revealed that there was. Opus Recruitment Solutions and Knology are tackling the tech skills problem directly with a technology conversion course. And again, at the end of it, when people have graduated from that course, it puts people in jobs. But enough of my internet searches. I invited the co-founder of Knology onto the show today to tell me a little bit more. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Bristol here in the UK so we can speak with Peter Anstey, co-founder of Knology, and he's going to talk about that technology conversion course and also how they're working with Opus to get people in jobs that have completed that course. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Peter. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, of course. So my name's Peter Anstey. I'm one of the co-founders on Knology. What we do in a very simple way is train people for tech careers. And when I say tech, it's quite a big wide word. Tech is more software, digital, web development type roles. Knology runs a 12-week boot camp system which teaches people code, software, agile thinking, and then places those people into their first role in the industry.
And I absolutely love what you guys are doing here because you're addressing that tech skill shortage directly. But can you just, for everyone listening that may or may not be aware, but you just tell them the scale of the tech skill shortage at the moment and also what skills are in most demand right now?
Yeah, well, there's the statistics of the scale. So the UK government came out in 2017, a couple years back now, obviously, and said that they felt that there was a 40,000 person skills shortage in technology. So the demand from businesses and jobs being created, there was a 40,000 windfall from that. Now that number's risen. We're probably closer to about 65 or 70,000 because the general estimation, this is from the UK Chamber of Commerce, said that it could be closer to 100,000 jobs going unfilled every year due to the skills shortage by 2020, which of course is being contributed to by something pretty big happening in a couple of months' time in Brexit. Because not only do we have a skills shortage, our talent pool, predominantly speaking, is European. We get a lot of our talent from Europe. 1 in 3 of applicants who comes to technology roles is based out of Europe. So we're about to lose that by the looks of it or have some certain changes in rules. And in the wider context of what that means for businesses is everyone can talk about the wider context, but it's what it means in the reality. So salaries are rocketing. In technology, people are being paid lots and lots of money because the demand is so high. It's created a bit more of a culture where people look to move on from jobs very quickly. They pick up projects. So consistency for companies looking to build tech products is more difficult. And that is how most businesses feel the tech skills gap, whether they know that it's because of that or they just think it's greedy, contractors or people who are asking for too much. That's kind of how it's felt on a very small level by companies. And obviously in the time it takes them to actually source these people, to find someone for a vacancy, and just the quality of people coming through, just not being nearly strong enough for what they're really looking for. But, if they meet 7 out of the 10 boxes you were trying to tick in a job spec, they're probably going to end up with the role. So it's a very big kind of national problem from a perspective of everybody's looking, but then in a very kind of granular way for lots of companies, it's reflected in the difficulty of just hiring people.
And after nearly 800 interviews on this podcast, I've noticed that there's something that most startup founders and business owners have got in common, and that's they come across a problem and they decide to do something about it. So myself and everybody listening, we all know that there is a tech skills shortage out there. But I'd be interested in finding out more about your startup story and how you got where you are now, because I did read a little online about how you left university feeling slightly let down by the system. It didn't actually provide you with a clear outcome. So can you tell me a little bit more about your story and how you got here?
Yeah, no, that's very much the case. And if you look at my background from university, I am not a tech profile. I studied creative writing and theatre at university, which is exactly as employable as it sounds. And never envisioned myself ever working in technology, nor really going anywhere near it. It was something everybody else did. And I started my own career in recruitment. I did a lot of graduate level recruitment and a lot of kind of core level junior roles and getting careers started prior to going into the financial services industry and doing more headhunting, executive search style work at a kind of really top end of some of the larger banks in the world. And what I found interesting as I moved through into a more strategic role, so designing how companies scaled and working with them over recruitment strategy, in particular in tech, was it didn't matter if you were one of the bigger players. It didn't matter if you were Facebook or Uber or Google or a startup, right, or something really small. And on the other end, your problem was exactly the same. Everybody knew about this technical skills gap. Everybody bemoaned what it meant for their recruitment processes and their ability to scale. And yet nobody really was actioning a difference to do that. And you can't fix the technical skills gap by hiring mid-level engineers. They're kind of already in the technical talent pool. And so I would often promote this idea of them hiring more juniors, trying to fix their problem 12 months from now, trying to be a bit more forward thinking, sometimes difficult to do for a tech company that is under huge demand to deliver right now. And if we're coming out of that as a wider point as to why maybe the technical skills gap exists in the first place, the demand from these companies, their investors, the teams to deliver products so quickly doesn't exactly foster an environment that juniors can do well in. That's not exactly the type of environment that is going to support you, allow you to fail, have a structure in there for you to do well. So just these companies and these teams just don't hire juniors in the first place. And the relevancy of the skills, when I was talking about my experience of the education system, which I loved going to uni, basically like switching off your life for 3 years, but from a career perspective, it wasn't so good. I mean, reality is you don't get taught commercial skill at university. You're more likely to open a book than you are to try something in practice. And if you think about that, being sat in an office, when was the last time you opened a book on the, on the floor and started reading during work? It just doesn't happen because you do things. And so I don't know if the education system, in particular for technology, has really caught up with where it needs to be, where companies would demand it to be. And there's a debate there, of course. Universities blame companies for not being more open, and companies blame universities for not teaching the right skills. And whilst this fight goes on over the top, there's a whole bunch of people in the middle who are, of course, not finding opportunity, not finding jobs, because the relevancy of what they're being taught it just is no longer applicable. I think I was reading some stats around computer science degrees. They sit amongst the highest of unemployment rates of any degree subject, computer science, which is baffling when you think about the demand for the people with those skills. But when, again, you pull that back to companies looking at these students and these graduates, and the course we run actually isn't focused particularly on graduates. It's really anyone who I would consider junior, which is just new to the industry, but particularly for graduates, because that's where normally a company would go. By the time that person's graduated, so if you've got someone this summer that you'd be looking at for your team, a 2019 graduate, the course that they're studying, which takes minimum of 3 years, maybe 4, Well, that was actually written 4 or 5 years ago. So if you think about that from a tech perspective, even if they are learning to code, which is rare, right, which is surprising, even if they are learning to code, it's 5 years out of date. So they're learning, they're learning technical skills that have been signed off to give them this piece of paper, which ultimately doesn't mean too much at the end of the day. And companies are then interviewing them and saying, well, actually, we moved on from that a long time ago, and now we code like this, or we work like this. So it's just the lag time between the learning that needs to happen and the business requirement is huge. And hence, this sort of general concern around, can we actually ever hire juniors to bolster our companies? And, what I was looking back when I was thinking of my university experience was pretty similar. You learn a lot more in the first 6 months of your job than you will in the 3 years of university.
So when you were faced with this talent shortage as a recruiter, you went out there and obviously created your technology conversion course. But can you tell me a little bit more about that and what to expect, equally if you're an applicant or even an employer, and how that works?
So the 12 weeks is structured over the kind of real environment they would go into from a tech perspective. So during the time with us, they will spend lots of it working around initial core coding principles. So we try and do as much of a full stack development cycle as we can, and we focus on web development and applications. So they spend time on the front end of technologies, which is, it depends on the listeners, but the front end is often considered to be everything the kind of user touches. You imagine it like a shop. You have a front end and the back end, and the shop is where you go in and you can pick the products and you can see it all looks nice and shiny. And then there's what's called the back end, which is probably like the warehouse, which is how all this stuff works and moves around, which is a nice way someone described it to me the other day. So we do a lot of front end work to introduce some of the creative sides of code. And then we do some back-end work to help them understand the full cycle and how that process looks. And something we were very keen to do when we started this, because we're very focused around employability, so we offer job guarantees to every single person that we offer a role to. So we guarantee them placement within the industry. And if we do not fulfill that promise, then we don't charge them anything to actually take the course in the first place. That makes us very careful around what we actually teach. It has to be relevant. And so none of it is simulated. We build real products for real companies. We bring businesses in and build, products for them in terms of what they might be working on or needing at the time. And everything reflects that environment they're going into. They're building around sprint methodologies, which is, weekly sprints of work, and they're working, with scrum masters in our team and our technical leads. None of it comes out and then is a surprise when that person goes into a job. Everything is just built and designed where the industry is right now, and will forever be like that. We'll forever be changing things to make sure that it's as relevant to what's happening next, and as relevant to what's right in front of them. And from a business perspective, it's what they get out of that course, and maybe what this person might look like at the end of it. Is a competent junior developer with experience in the software that we teach, of course, which is never going to, there's about 600 coding languages out there, I think, so you're never going to match everybody's technical stack. But they understand core principles. They understand how to work well. They've got a commercialization from the work that they've done already, and they're ready then to be taken further, and that company doesn't have to do some of the more painful bits of education when it comes to training, which is some of the really basic stuff, which can take a lot of time if they haven't got the time to do so. So I reckon by the end of the course, they've probably done about 1,000 hours of code, something like that.
I was just going to say, if we do have anyone listening that's your words have really resonated with them, they want a career change, they want to learn new skills and make the most of this fantastic opportunity that's out there at the moment, how long will the course realistically take of their time?
Well, it's full-time over the 12 weeks. So it's 9 to 5, which is a really big thing, obviously, for anybody who's going to make the commitment to do it. And that's how we can turn things around so quickly for this person. I would describe it as quite an intense period of their life to come in and do this. Because whilst the hours are 9 to 5, it's on the courses we've run so far, it's not unheard of for people to be in early and leaving late or working over weekends. Not because we're asking them to, but it's actually quite fun to code, despite popular belief. It can be quite fun and quite interesting. They all come in with this mentality of 12 weeks is going to convert their careers. And, junior developers, going into the marketplace, you're talking anywhere between, sort of earning a salary of £25,000 to £30,000, something like that, as a sort of starting marker. And if you're going to learn something in just 12 weeks, which makes you worth that amount of money, it probably means you've got a real skill. Yeah. And you've worked really hard to go and get that skill.
And of course, we will have a lot of business leaders listening today who will be experiencing many of the problems that we've talked about. So I'm curious, are there any significant trends that you're noticing as regards recruitment challenges? And also, how are you addressing them directly between Opus and Knology?
Well, companies hiring in the tech space, will all know the difficulty of finding someone relevant to their team and their need. It takes too long, it costs too much, they don't stay. Will be very consistent themes of people, anyone who's running a business in tech. What I probably would say, to anybody who's thinking about recruitment strategy in general, is to, a lot of people look at recruitment as a cost area. It will cost me money and it's almost seemed like loss. I think recruitment is a profit area, and can be looked at such. And if you invest in it properly, you can get a lot of value from the people that you find. I mean, if someone came along to you and offered you a total superstar who would be in your business for 3 years and help you build your product, you'd snap their hand off to get that person. Suddenly the value would change. And everyone's trying to just edge on recruitment. They're trying to see where they can save the money or how they can do so. But, rightly so, right? Which equally any business owner will know that everyone is trying to save money, but recruitment is so important to your company and finding the relevant talent that's going to make you great, right? You ask most people, and whether it's just hyperbole or they actually believe it, most people say their people are their most important asset, people first. But very rarely do you see a company truly live that in their recruitment style. Very rarely do you see them put themselves out there and treat applicants with respect, sell to them a little bit. You're not doing the world a favor by having a vacancy. The moment you realize that, the moment you can actually start getting some proper conversations going with really good people who want to come and work for you because you're exciting. What are you going to do for them? And if companies approach the market in that way, then they can still do all the things they want to and assessing that person, but they're doing it from a new mindset. So that's probably one relevant area. And then it's kind of like they've got to realize, when we talk about technical skills gaps, I think a lot of it is down actually to the employer. That these are the people who are actually creating the technical skills gap. They're the ones who are saying they won't hire juniors because it's not what they need right now. And so they say we must have 2 years experience, 3 years experience, whatever the demands might be over someone who's going to come in immediately. But unfortunately, of course, the person sat in their seat 3 years ago, said exactly the same thing. They said, we don't need a junior person. We need them to be this. And therefore, of course, the person was never created, hence the problem you have in front of you. So, I get why the immediate demand is there. And I think that you can always look to facilitate that in better ways. And there's better ways you can go about your recruitment if you truly invest in it properly, and you can solve that. But I think everybody should be thinking about what the future looks like, not just for them, but for the whole industry. Because, of course, if the industry does well, and if you and your competitors and everybody else is investing into junior talent, then everybody wins, because everybody ultimately is then piling in more people to this talent pool that you will get to select from in 2 or 3 or 4 years' time. So it's kind of the responsibility, I think, of most companies to start thinking a little bit further ahead and trying to invest in talent, or offer, whether it's internships, whether it's roles, opportunities in their business that can allow that process to start.
And of course, we've all seen those headlines about jobs being lost through automation. However, the reality is often that the old repetitive and mundane roles that are disappearing are actually being replaced by a new selection of value and roles, that deliver value to ensure businesses are ready for the 21st century. So if we do have anyone listening to this conversation anywhere in the world, what kind of areas would you recommend that they retrain or reskill in to actually stay ahead of the curve and protect their own future? Do you think it is primarily around coding?
Well, I do. It's a very, very difficult question to answer, which is always the worst way to answer any question. It's difficult because in tech in particular, and I do think retraining in tech is good. I don't think that any scenario will lead to that being a bad decision, because the world is digital, everything is going digital, and this automation stuff, you're right, it is going to create jobs and opportunity. And if you've never looked at a line of code, well, you don't understand software. It's kind of like the conversation is going to be happening. You're just not going to be involved. It's like it will happen all around you. So I don't think it's ever a bad thing to pick up any coding whatsoever. In terms of particular languages, I think I was saying there's about 600 languages, sort of used across the industry. Some are used more than others. There's some really popular ones where you might, have a good base. So things like JavaScript, very, very popular. About 40% of software houses around the world use it, which doesn't sound like that much, but then the next closest is 16%. So it's quite a high ratio of companies using JavaScript somewhere within their technical framework. So that's a really good starting place. And then there's things like Python, which are very, very popular on away from web development and a bit closer to cybersecurity and data science. So those are two in particular where you're not going to go wrong. But tech changes all the time. The whole industry kind of tends to pick itself up every 2 years, throw itself in the bin, say, what the hell were we doing, and start again. So in terms of retraining and relearning, I think it's about getting good at some of the principles. It's understanding what does actual code look like, playing with it, creating something with it, so at least you understood some of the fundamentals. I think it's a bit like, code is just a language. That's what code is. It's like if you learn Spanish, it would be much easier to learn Portuguese, right? And if you learn Portuguese, then you could go on to start doing French or German, because the reality is some of the values remain the same. And that's exactly the same with code. So if you picked up one, it's much easier to pick up the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth, et cetera, et cetera.
So if we have someone listening to us today, sat on a bus to work, to go into a job that they'd really dislike and thinking this could be a great opportunity for them to do something different and change their career, and they're thinking about embarking on and taking seriously your technology conversion course with Knology, what kind of ability and level do they need to be at right now before they actually sit down and take the course?
Well, I will actually, we're very open. I'm very agnostic when it comes to somebody's background. You could be, exiting A-levels and looking for your first role. You could be 35 and wanting to return to work, leaving the military. It really doesn't matter to me so much. You're a junior only by the industry standards. So I don't mind too much about the person's background. I think the key thing to start with is there's some great resources online, Code Academy, Free Code Camp. Are two I'd probably recommend, and both of which are completely free to use. You can go on, you can start playing with it. So that's number one, because then you can actually try it, and you can see if it's fun, if it's enjoyable. And then it's more about, do you want the outcome? Do you want to work in software and digital? And that's more about thinking about yourself. Those are the things, when I look at people for our intake, the things that I'm really interested in are your motivations, your attitude, and your kind of general ambition. Because if you have those core qualities, the rest can come. You can be taught anything, so long as you are trainable and you're willing to learn. So if you really want to do it, then it will kind of happen for you. It sounds a bit corny, but what I mean by that is if you have the ambition, the attitude, then everything else is kind of what I have, I suppose, from a course perspective. And I can give you all those things, but, I can't teach people to take their career seriously. I can't teach people to work hard. And the realities are for businesses who hire these people, these are the qualities they're trying to buy from you. One of the first things I tell people who are junior and looking to go to a new job is to realize that they are an investment for that company. So the reality is you're not going to add value to a business in your first 6 months. You're just not. You're not good enough. I'm sorry to break your bubble, but you're not ready, as it were. You have to learn. You have to gain skills. You have to learn how the company works. You have to learn the technical needs. So but when you realize that, it's actually very empowering, because you realize you're a burden and you're a cost, and then you know what you're actually selling, which is when you train me how to be good at this job, when you teach me how to work in this industry, I will be amazing because I'll have your learning, your training, and I'll be hardworking, and I'll be ambitious, and I'll have tenacity, and I'll work well with your team. It's like you're the investment. So treat yourself as such and sell the things that they can't teach you, which is always the things I'm really interested in finding. And we've had great successes off the back of our course from people who have never touched a line of code in their lives, and also shouldn't come from the normal technical background. I don't care if they've done computer science or maths or physics, the kind of more traditional pools. One of the best coders I've worked with had a degree in marketing.
Wow.
It's like there's no correlation from my perspective, at least. I'm sure many would disagree with me, between your ability to work within technology and the things that you studied. Creative people can be equally as interesting to a tech firm as someone who's brilliant at writing algorithms. They do different jobs. So I'd encourage anybody who is thinking about making a career change, wants something new, to just start doing it. There's loads of resource out there, loads of people who want to talk about it as well. And the opportunity is so huge that I don't think it's ever a waste of time. I think it's always a good thing to invest in.
I love the almost dream team that you've got going on here between Opus and, of course, Knowledgy. I mean, it seems to be incredibly forward-way thinking of tackling the skills shortage. Do you think more recruiters will quickly follow your lead?
Yes. I think boot camps in general are going to become a lot more popular. In the UK, boot camp's quite a new idea. Yeah. So there's a few here, and there's a few doing brilliant work as well. But companies don't really know that they can hire from these places, nor do people know that university isn't the only option. Whereas if you go across the pond to America, the technical skills shortage in America is much greater. So every year they have 400,000 roles. They go unfilled in digital. The big umbrella place over many roles there, but that's about what they think it is. And they place 20,000 people a year through boot camps in America. So it's far more consistent. So I think in the UK, our tech sector is the fastest growing. It's soon to be the largest employment sector. It's going to grow, and people are going to look at new resources. And I think boot camps will be a very traditional way to do that. And if companies, more companies who are recruitment firms, can start doing it as well, then they can tack on to, ultimately the thing they do well already, which is kind of what Opus does really well, is placing people, right? They're the fastest growing tech recruitment firm in Europe and one of the biggest. And so they're very good at finding difficult people to find and working with tech companies when they're trying to scale. Very simply, you're saying not only do we place your senior team and we can do all of the top stuff that you want, we also create talent. So we can start thinking about your business in 12 months. And we can start building towards a sustainable talent pool, which is probably what boot camps are really all about. It's sustainability. It's having another option. When option one fails, which is what is already happening, and it's I think it's about to get worse before it gets better. The struggle to find good people is going to continue until companies come forward and make the investments to actually hire more for the future.
So what's next for you guys? Is there anything else you can share with me about the road ahead and that future and your grand vision?
I don't know, sort of general world domination, I think. So. That's the normal answer. No, the thing we're trying to prove at the moment is our 0 to 12 week theory, which is that I can take anybody from any background, and in 12 weeks I can place them into tech. That's the theory. We've already run one course, which has evidenced that very, very well, with a lot of our students going straight into work. And we're running a new one, which will be coming up at the end of February. And we'll be running more in June and more in September. And we're already getting interest from businesses to actually run bespoke courses for them too. So there's a few different kind of wheels in motion. But this is the thing I want to prove this year, is that it can be anybody. Because then that's what's really exciting, both to people, right, to the kind of consumer, as it were, and knowing that in 12 weeks they could turn their life around, or to a business and going to them and saying, good news, you can be a lot more open about the types of people you are aiming to attract. Because, well, one thing about tech, of course, it has a technical skills gap, but it's also very homogenous as an industry. So it's very male-dominated, racially, very white kind of attendance. I think it's about 85% of the industry or something like that. And predominantly speaking, a lot of that's down to the type of backgrounds and type of people who they pick. And so it's really exciting to go to a company and say, good news, you can be open to the type of person that you want to take on board, because in 12 weeks, I can make them just as good as anybody, and just as strong and just as exciting with, hopefully a whole bunch of other skill sets that they're going to bring to your team as well. So that's the key thing to prove first. And then we hopefully build that up and start working slightly closer with companies to make that a reality.
Fantastic. So if we do have anyone listening that wants to find out more information about Knowledgy or your relationship with Opus and what everything looks like, and also stay up to date with updates throughout the year, what's the best way of doing that?
Very simply via our website. So www.knology.io. Knology is spelled Nology, a little bit like technology with the tech word taken out. Very, very clever. www.knology.io is the best place to find us, and there's all contact links and dropping messages, and people can find me on LinkedIn and drop me a message. There's plenty of ways to find us. I've made that bit very easy. If you want to find us, I promise you can. And I'm always open to conversations and chats, because I think one thing about tech in particular is it's so vast, and the more research you do into it, the problem is it actually asks more questions than answers them. You suddenly realize it's everywhere and it's part of everything, and it's kind of much bigger than perhaps you expected. So I'm always welcoming conversations with people who are like, I think this is cool. I get it. It's interesting. I don't really get what it is, how I do it, where we work on it, etc. So I always welcome those kind of conversations, and we do regular events and stuff to kind of show people where it can all go and what it can do for them.
Excellent. Well, there's so many great points you made during the interview there, especially that lag time between the current methods of learning and actually meeting the business needs and the business requirements. So I love what you're doing and how you're solving that gap in the tech skills, but also providing a job guarantee for everyone that graduates. And of course, bringing diversity into tech, which is something that's needed so much. So a big thank you for joining me today on the podcast. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Peter.
No, appreciate it. Thanks so much.
I love Peter's story there. After studying writing at university, he found himself surprised as anyone to be pioneering the next generation of tech talent through a coding boot camp. And I too can relate to that feeling of being slightly let down by a system that didn't provide a clear outcome. But like so many of the guests on this show, he turned a problem into an opportunity and has gone out to fix it. The problem between a dated education system and that growing demand for digital talent has left a massive skills gap, but he did something about it. And I love how he says, if he can do it, anyone can. And on his LinkedIn profile, it says, I'm excited to open doors of the tech industry to a new pool of talent. And it's never too late to find a job you love. Words of wisdom indeed, and a great guy to boot. So wherever you're listening to this podcast, please let me know if it inspired you or left you with any additional questions. And whatever your fleeting thoughts are right now, I want you to capture it, write it down and send it to me. And you can do that by a quick email, techblogwriter@outlook.com, or you can get me on Twitter and Instagram @NeilC.Hughes. Now, I'm quite excited about your thoughts on creating a new narrative. So please, remember, send those messages over to me. But all that inspiration has worn me out. A man snooze in my favourite chair awaits so I can recharge for tomorrow's guest. So I'm afraid we've reached that time again. A big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.